The city was a beast of steel and light, a place where Nala felt both invisible and exposed. She had arrived only a month ago, a small-town girl with a big city dream tucked into the corner of her suitcase next to her worn-out sketchbooks. The job at the Quiet Cup Cafe was a lucky break, a tiny anchor in the vast churning ocean of this new life. It was a cozy place, smelling of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon, with soft lighting that made the world outside the large windows seem a little less harsh. Nala liked the routine, the familiar hiss of the espresso machine, the way regular customers would smile when she remembered their orders. It was a simple, quiet life, and for now that was enough. This particular evening, a slow, drizzling rain had begun to fall, painting the streets in slick, dark strokes. The usual bustle of the sidewalk had faded, leaving the cafe in a bubble of soft jazz and the gentle patter against the glass. Nala was wiping down the counter, her mind drifting to the half-finished drawing of a sparrow she had started that morning, when the bell above the door jangled not with its usual cheerful ring, but with a harsh, violent clatter. 3 men walked in, and the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. They were loud, their voices booming and coarse, shattering the cafe's peaceful silence. They didn't walk so much as swagger, knocking into a chair, which clattered to the floor. They ignored it. Nala's co-worker, a young university student named Jiho, froze behind the pastry case, his eyes wide with apprehension. The few other customers bent their heads lower over their drinks, suddenly very interested in the patterns of foam in their lattes. A cold knot tightened in Nala's stomach. Fear was a bitter taste in her mouth. Back home, her father had always told her to stand up for what was right, even when it was scary, especially when it was scary. She watched as one of the men, the largest of the 3, slammed his fist on the counter, demanding service and making the ceramic mugs rattle. Jiho scurried forward, his hands trembling as he took their order. The men laughed, a harsh, mocking sound, and made a comment about Jiho that was both cruel and unnecessary. Something inside Nala snapped. This was her space now, her little sanctuary, and these bullies were soiling it. Taking a deep, shaky breath that did little to calm her racing heart, she stepped out from behind the counter. Her voice, when it came, was clearer and firmer than she expected. "You need to leave." The laughter stopped. All 3 men turned to look at her. The leader, the one with the cruel eyes, smirked. "What did you say, little girl?" The term little girl grated on her, but it also fueled her courage. She stood her ground, her back straight. "I said you need to leave. Now. You are frightening our customers and my co-worker. We won't serve you." The man's smirk vanished, replaced by a dark scowl. He took a step toward her, his size suddenly feeling immense and threatening. The air grew thick and heavy. Nala could feel every pair of eyes in the cafe on her, a mixture of fear and silent pleading. She braced herself, unsure what he would do, but determined not to back down. It was at that exact moment that the door opened again. So quietly, it was almost swallowed by the tension. The rain had picked up, and a gust of cool, damp wind swept inside. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the neon-lit street. He was tall and wore a long, impeccably tailored black coat that seemed to drink the light from the room. He didn't say a word, but his presence was like a bucket of ice water. The 3 bullies saw him. The change was instantaneous and shocking. Their bravado evaporated. The leader's aggressive posture collapsed into a nervous slouch. All 3 of them bowed their heads deeply, their eyes fixed on the floor. The cafe was so quiet Nala could hear the hum of the refrigerator. The man in the black coat, Taehyung, stepped fully inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. His eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the room, taking in the overturned chair, Jiho's pale face, the cowering customers, and finally they landed on Nala. He looked at her for a long moment, and she met his gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She saw no anger there, only a calm, assessing curiosity. He turned his attention to the 3 men. "Leave," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight of absolute authority that seemed to vibrate in the silent room. "And do not come back." The men didn't hesitate. They mumbled apologies, righted the fallen chair with frantic hands, and practically scrambled over each other to get out the door, disappearing into the rainy night. The silence they left behind was profound. Taehyung turned to Nala. He walked toward the counter, his steps measured and silent on the tiled floor. He stopped in front of her. "I apologize for their behavior," he said, his voice now softer, though still layered with that same quiet power. He pulled a sleek, black wallet from his inside coat pocket and placed a stack of bills on the counter. It was far, far more than enough to cover any potential damage. For the trouble, Nala could only nod, her voice suddenly lost. He gave her one last lingering look, a look that seemed to see past her brave facade and right down to the scared, trembling girl inside. Then he turned and left as quietly as he had arrived, the bell giving a soft, almost respectful chime. Nala stood there, her hands still gripping the edge of the counter for support. The cafe slowly came back to life around her, a wave of relieved chatter and nervous laughter filling the space. But Nala didn't hear any of it. All she could see was the image of the man in the black coat, his serious face, and the surprising gentleness she thought she saw hidden deep within his eyes. The rain continued to fall outside, but for Nala, the storm had just begun, and its name was Tai-hyung. The days that followed the rainy night encounter unfolded with a new, strange rhythm for Nala. The memory of Tai-hyung was a ghost in the quiet corners of the cafe, a lingering sensation that made the air feel different. She found herself glancing at the door whenever the bell chimed, a part of her half expecting, half fearing, to see the tall, imposing figure in the black coat again. For a week, he did not appear, and Nala began to convince herself that the entire event had been a dramatic flash in the pan, a story she would one day tell friends about her first month in the big city. She focused on her routine, on the comforting weight of the coffee grinder in her hand, on the sketches of customers she drew on stray napkins during her breaks. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, during the slow lull between the lunch rush and the evening crowd, that he returned. The sun was out, casting long, golden beams across the clean floor. He entered not with the drama of a rain-soaked savior, but with a simple, quiet authority that still managed to change the pressure in the room. He was dressed more casually this time, dark trousers and a simple, well-fitting sweater, but he carried himself with the same undeniable gravity. He didn't look at anyone else. His eyes found Nala immediately, as if he had known exactly where she would be. He chose a small table in the corner, the one tucked beside the large window that offered a view of the bustling street. He ordered a simple black coffee from Ji-ho, who served him with a nervous, reverent silence. When Nala brought the cup to his table, her hand was remarkably steady, though she could feel the beat of her own pulse in her throat. He didn't speak, only gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of thanks. And that was it. He stayed for an hour, drinking his coffee slowly, his gaze often distant, lost in the world outside the window. He left a generous tip under his saucer and departed as quietly as he had come. This became his new pattern. He began to visit every few days, always during the quiet hours. He always sat at the same corner table, always ordered the same black coffee, and always acknowledged Nala with that same quiet nod. The fear he had initially inspired in her began to melt away, replaced by a burning curiosity. Who was this man who commanded such instant obedience from bullies, yet sat alone in a cafe, his eyes holding a shadow of something that looked, to Nala, strikingly like loneliness? The first time he spoke to her, beyond a simple thank you, was a week into his visits. She was refilling the sugar jars on the table next to his. Her hand slipped, and a small cascade of white crystals spilled onto the tabletop. She muttered a soft, "Oh," under her breath, feeling a flush of embarrassment warm her cheeks. "It's just sugar," his voice came, calm and low. "It can be cleaned." She looked up, surprised he had addressed her. He was watching her, and for the first time, she saw the very faintest hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. It transformed his entire face, softening the sharp, serious lines. "It's messy," she replied, brushing the sugar into her palm. "Most interesting things are," he said. Then he gestured to the small, open sketchbook she had left on the counter. "You are the artist?" And so the first thread of a connection was spun. That single question opened a door. The next time he came, he asked about her drawings. The time after that, he asked how long she had been in the city. Their conversations were slow, measured, built in fragments during the moments she wiped down nearby tables or brought him a fresh cup. She learned that his name was Tai-hyung. He learned that hers was Nala. He spoke of his love for classical music, the way a single cello piece could fill a silent room with more emotion than 1,000 shouted words. She told him about the paintings she dreamed of creating, vast canvases full of color and feeling that she couldn't yet afford. She confessed that sometimes the city felt too big, too loud, and that the cafe was her only familiar island. One afternoon, he arrived just as her shift was ending. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He was standing by the door as she took off her apron. "Walk with me," he said. It wasn't a command, but a request, layered with a vulnerability that surprised her. She agreed. They walked in silence for a while, the sounds of the city a gentle hum around them. The evening air was cool on her skin. They found themselves in a small, secluded park, where the noise of traffic was muted by the rustling leaves of old trees. It was there, on a path scattered with fallen leaves, that he finally spoke about himself. "People see me," he began, his hands tucked into his pockets. "And they see only what those men saw that night. They see power. They see a reason to be afraid. They bow their heads and they say what they think I want to hear." He stopped walking and turned to look at her. "You never did. That first night, you looked right at me. You were scared, I could see it. But you didn't look away. You didn't bow." Nala's heart felt too large for her chest. "I saw a man who stopped some bullies," she said softly. "I saw someone who was kind." A profound sadness touched his eyes. "Kindness is a luxury in my world. It is often mistaken for weakness." He hesitated, then reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His fingers gently brushed against hers, then curled, enveloping her hand in his. His palm was warm, his grip firm, yet incredibly gentle. A jolt, warm and electric, shot up Nala's arm. It was a simple touch, but it felt more intimate than any kiss she could have imagined. "In your world," she whispered, her eyes locked on their joined hands. "What am I?" Taehyung lifted her hand, his thumb stroking the back of her knuckles with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "In my world," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "you are the first real thing I have found in a very, very long time." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet of the park and the deepening twilight, the last of Nala's walls crumbled. The powerful, mysterious Taehyung was gone, replaced by a man who was simply, beautifully lonely. And as he held her hand, she knew with a certainty that shook her to her core, that she no longer wanted to be just an island. She wanted to be his sanctuary. The sanctuary they built for one another was not made of stone or wood, but of quiet moments and whispered truths. The park became their cathedral, the quiet corner table at the cafe their sacred space. With each passing day, the formal distance between Nala and Taehyung evaporated, replaced by a comfortable, easy closeness that felt to Nala like coming home. He began to share pieces of his life with her, not the powerful, intimidating parts, but the fragile human ones. He told her about the heavy weight of responsibility he carried, a burden placed on his shoulders from a young age that left little room for softness or dreams. He spoke of a life lived in a gilded cage, surrounded by people yet feeling profoundly alone. In return, Nala shared her hopes, her fears of failing as an artist, the simple, homesick memories of her family. She painted pictures for him with her words, and he listened as if her dreams were the most important story he had ever heard. Their physical closeness grew as naturally as a vine climbing a wall. A comforting hand on her shoulder when she spoke of her doubts evolved into his arm wrapping around her as they walked, pulling her close to his side, shielding her from the chill of the evening. A friendly hug goodbye at the end of an evening lingered, becoming a tight, breathless embrace where they simply stood, hearts pounding against each other, communicating more with that silent pressure than they ever could with words. The first time he kissed her, it was not a question, but an answer. It happened on the balcony of his apartment, the city lights sprawling below them like a field of fallen stars. He turned her to face him, his hands cradling her face with an unbearable gentleness, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. He leaned in slowly, giving her every moment to refuse, but she rose to meet him. The kiss was not a spark, but a conflagration. It was slow and deep and tasted of promise, and a longing so profound, it left them both trembling, gasping for air as they broke apart, their foreheads resting together. The night they became husband and wife was the most natural progression of their story. It was not a lavish, public spectacle, but a private, profound ceremony, an exchange of vows spoken in the hushed silence of his home, with only the moon as their witness. Afterward, the air in his bedroom was thick with a new, potent energy. The world outside ceased to exist. There were no titles, no pasts, no burdens. There was only Nala and Taehyung. His touches, which had always been so controlled and gentle, now held a new, thrilling urgency. He explored her not with the practiced skill of a worldly man, but with the raw, reverent wonder of someone discovering a miracle. His hands traced the lines of her body as if he were memorizing a sacred map, his lips following the same path, branding her with his devotion. For Nala, every sensation was new and overwhelming. The feel of his skin against hers, the solid strength of his body, the whispered words of love against her neck that were more intoxicating than any wine. She was nervous, a flutter in her stomach, but it was eclipsed by a powerful rising tide of love and a deep primal need to be as close to him as it was humanly possible. When they finally joined, it was a culmination of every look, every touch, every whispered secret they had ever shared. It was an act of pure, unadulterated love, a fusion of two lonely souls becoming one complete being. The world narrowed to the space of the bed, to the sound of their ragged breathing, to the feeling of his heart hammering against her own. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the dark, the silence peaceful and full. The moon cast a silver beam across the bed, illuminating Taehyung's face as he propped himself up on an elbow to look down at her. His breathing was still heavy, his chest rising and falling in deep, slow gasps. His eyes, dark and intense, searched her face, filled with an emotion so vast it seemed to fill the entire room. He gently brushed a curl away from her damp forehead, his touch lingering. He leaned close, his lips nearly touching her ear, and his voice was a raw, breathless whisper, filled with awe and the shock of a discovery that had shaken him to his very core. "You never told me you are this tight," he gasped, the words not a complaint, but the highest form of praise. He was not speaking only of her body, but of the overwhelming, all-consuming tightness of the bond they had just forged, the sheer, breathtaking power of the love that had so completely captured him, holding him in a grip more powerful than any he had ever known. Nala understood. She smiled, a slow, tender, knowing smile, and reached up to touch his face. "Now you know," she whispered back. "Now you know my forever." He gathered her into his arms then, holding her as if she were the most precious, fragile, and powerful thing in his universe. He whispered his promises into her skin, promises of protection, of devotion, of a love that would outlast the city lights outside their window. The brave girl from the cafe and the lonely man from a world of shadows had found their way to each other. Their unexpected meeting had led them down a path of gentle discovery, of passionate intimacy, and had finally delivered them here, to this quiet room, to this unbreakable promise. They had found their forever in each other's arms. If you were moved by Nala and Taehyung's journey from a lonely cafe to a love that changed their worlds, consider subscribing for more heartfelt stories